Monaco Pizza presents SDP. The Steve Dangle Podcast with your hosts, Steve Dangle and Adam Wylde.
Well, I could tell today's guest was important to Steve. Jesse, I could tell.
Oh, here it is.
I could tell. You know why?
How?
Because Jesse, at 11:43, I received a phone call that Steve was getting off the Don Valley Parkway.
Wow.
Which leaves him just enough time to get here at noon.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
Jesse, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Adam always gets a call at that time. The difference between me being late or not is when he decides he's going to show up and just help me into the garage.
So what's the truth here?
Well, to be fair, I'm often waking up from a nap, which is what happened today. So I usually get my naps in from like 10:30 to 11:30. So sometimes I'm a bit sluggish getting there. Sometimes.
So was Steve regular late
Here's
or
the
regular
truth.
early?
The truth is I'm usually a little late. And Adam also takes 15 minutes to do a 2-minute commute.
Gus Katsaros, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Gus, it's at Cats Hockey on Twitter. He is a hockey analyst for McKeen's, and you'd obviously know the magazine and that sort of thing. Gus, you are a scout. You are a knower of the game. You know, you're not just a guy that throws around names and contracts. You actually analyze how people play it.
I try my best.
Try your best. Yeah. Well,
Okay, so it's been a very long time since you last came on the show. Adam wasn't here.
Nope.
The other guy in studio was Chris, not Jesse. And here's how I know it was a really, really long time ago. The topic of discussion that day, like the big thing, was the Leafs traded Joe Colburn.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Remember that?
And what a trade it was. Future 20-goal scorer, Joe Colburn.
Yes, and then not much after that.
Future Colorado Avalanche member.
I don't think that we discussed Joe Colburn as a 20-goal scorer, but...
No, he had like one good season.
I think he had one good season with the Avs.
Flash-in-the-pan seasons.
Yep.
It's one of those things where we thought, yeah, okay, it's just a throwaway. He's just going to end up going somewhere, and all the power to him. He had one really good season, but he's never really been able to duplicate very much after that.
No, he hasn't. It's crazy. So, guys, unlike most of us who spent our summers frolicking in the sunshine, although we had a terrible summer here, I'm not going to lie.
But for people who live in places where you can do that.
Yeah, I'm sure that was fun for you.
Yeah.
You spent this summer writing up players. Looking at game tape, looking at statistics, looking at all the things that one does to create a scouting report. And I think scouting's like this mystifying thing for most of us. Most of us have an idea of what you do as a scout, but really and truly, the work that goes into it is pretty unbelievable.
Well, I need to actually do something to make sure that we understand what that word scout means.
Okay.
Because at this point in time, I'm not really doing much scouting anymore. Mm-hmm. And I find that the title of scout should actually be reserved. It should only be reserved to people that work for a team. If you work for a junior team, you're scouting players. And the main component is anybody could do analysis on a player. You could watch someone and have a very distinct opinion. May not be right, but there's going to be components that are correct in that. Mm-hmm. You do nothing with that information, though. You post it on the internet, nothing really happens. A scout will have to verify the info, will have to go do a lot more digging into the type of player, talk to parents, talk to agents, talk to other players, see if they want this person to be part of that organization. That bringing the player into your organization, that's the scouting element that is missing from a lot of today's analysis online. So while I've done that in spurts in the past, mm-hmm. I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
So if it came down to me, I think anybody that isn't affiliated with the team shouldn't be able to use the title of scout. They should be all analysts. There's no problem with being an analyst. You're still doing your work. But if you're involved with that element where your job is on the line, if you're not bringing in these players, then perhaps you don't deserve that title.
Fair enough. Yeah. Wow.
Rather than, I guess if you're a scout, rather than just simply analyzing a player, it's your career is invested in their success.
Correct.
Right? And in the team's success.
So essentially what you're doing is you're picking from a pool of players and you're saying, I like this guy, I like this guy, I like this guy because of this, I like this guy because of this. These are the pros, these are the cons. This is what we need to do to bring this guy into our fold. And you have a degree of success. It could be 20 degrees. It could be 20%. Out of 10 players, you bring in 2 that actually become players. Scouting isn't an exact science. It's a lot to do with hit and miss. But the good ones know how to do the player analysis. And it's becoming less about player analysis than I think the relationships involved in bringing in the information. At a junior level, what you're trying to bring in is a player that's in their teens, immature. See, I'm not even really... You write so much and you totally forget about...
No, so you're worried about being professional on this show.
Yeah.
Okay. Trust me, you don't need to.
Okay, then I'm going back to immature. They're immature.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, exactly.
If I know what you mean, that's communication.
That passes.
I think you did it.
So essentially, if I had to say that to a GM, I'd have to say, this kid is immature. He's just not ready to be, or he's good, his skills are good, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that we have to worry about. These are the things that we have to work with parents, agents, whatever the case is. They could develop players because it's not just about performance anymore. You still have to be able to develop players to be able to play to that next level. Now you have NHL scouts that are doing something similar but at a different age range. So you're going from somewhere between 18 to 21, maybe even younger, 17 to 21, and you're trying to develop the mindset of what am I looking at each age group? What am I looking at that is a positive going forward? What am I looking at that is a possible detriment at this point? And then the very next thing is, how do we get this player into the fold?
Right.
At some point, you're going to be using a lot. When you get to the pro level, and these are just the amateur guys, they're doing their analysis, they're trying to develop their own method of trying to figure out how do we bring players into our team to become successful. Once you get to the pro stage and you start doing more of the pro scouting, at that point in time, you essentially know what a player is capable of. The reports that I write, I mean, it's not like I'm affiliated with an NHL team yet. And it's not like it's rocket science. It's a matter of understanding what you're watching, and that takes time. Like, I mean, to be able to understand what you're actually seeing, and then being able to integrate all these fantastic new developments coming from the analytics world, and it shapes and it forms and it changes the way that you view the game, and then down to the individual players, and then down to the individual components of those players. But from a pro scouting perspective, you essentially know the core of what this player does, what they can do, what they're able to bring. Now you're looking at more relationships. You're going around and trying to say, my GM does this, my GM would like this, my coach is doing this, we're looking for this type of a player. You're really working those relationships to bring in some information. Your GM will do the analysis. There might be an analytics crew that looks at the numbers. You might have other players or other resources into which to get information, and you're essentially just trying to do that, round up the info.
Wow.
There was a really interesting article, I think it was posted yesterday. It was a conversation I saw today between Tyler Dello and Justin Bourne. And what Dello was arguing is you can use video to make any player look good or bad. It's analytics, the numbers behind the video, or that complement the video, that can actually show you more. And I know you talked about analytics there. Do you look at it that way?
Absolutely. And I guess the major fight at this point in time is how they're starting to divulge into a single digit or a single metric to try to bring players around.
Like WAR?
Yeah, or like a hero chart.
Yeah, exactly. The hero chart is a little bit different in the fact that it takes a few different statistics.
Metrics.
Five metrics, I think.
I like how they have constructed that, and I like the information that it provides. I don't think it's a final resting place. I think that's an initial focal point of analysis. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's something similar for WAR and GAR and all of those. But we're also at the point now where analytics is not so much just about the individual data, the individual analysis. There are concepts that are being created. For instance, the fighting. Fighting, you see a big detriment in the NHL at this point. And you want to replace those players with skilled players, or with someone that can provide something above and beyond punching someone in the face. So the skill set, what I feel has become is first-line players are first-line players. You're there because you're elite. You have multiple elite skills. Whatever the case is to land you in that spot, you're perfect. Second and third liners are starting to become much closer in skill set to the degree that they're almost interchangeable. Mm-hmm. Third and fourth line players are getting very close to that degree as well. So if you have a fourth line player that is almost as good as a third line player, or at least interchangeable, and even in points or situations, those single metrics start to become a lot more clear, because you think, okay, we got all these players and we need a 5. Go find me a 5. You come back with a list of 5s, and now you go to the video and you say, this guy does this. This is what makes him a 5. This guy does this. This is what makes him a 5. This is more conducive to our particular style of play. This is not. So I'm more inclined now to believe that there's more value in those single digits than I was when they first brought out Corsi and just shot attempts. Yeah. Because that was a bit more of an abstract type of metric that encompassed way too much of uncertainty. A player,
a vague picture.
Correct.
Right. So you're saying, like, for example, we need a guy. We just need a shot. We just need a guy who has a really good shot. Doesn't have to play incredible defense. We already have this guy, this guy, this guy. We lost someone who's really high power offense. We need a replacement. Josh Levo, how you doing? So you go in and insert him. He's not necessarily the best player that you have available, but he's
the guy that fills that role.
Correct. You're looking for somebody that fills a specific definition, but can provide a skill set that will work within the structure of the system provided by the coaches. And that's the important part. Players are so similar in terms of skill sets these days, it's not really that much of a difference. For instance, and like I said, a second and a third liner are almost interchangeable. The only thing that makes them distinct is the way that they skate, the interaction of their skills is what makes them unique. I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
We all know Michael Grabner.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Michael Grabner is all feet, except for last year where he was all hands. 2 years ago, he was all feet.
All feet. Scored from his butt, I think, his first goal.
So, the Austrian Mason Raymond.
Yeah.
So Mason Raymond was going to be the second player that I was going to mention. So
that's amazing.
Sorry.
No, this is good. That's good.
And
we're on the same wavelength, though.
And Antoine Vermette is the third player that I was going to mention. So
interesting.
To me, all those players had one distinct skill set. They had fantastic feet, and their hands couldn't catch up with their feet. So we look at guys, and this directly goes into a Leaf, Kasperi Kapanen, who's all skill, but is he really? He's all speed. To me, he's all speed. And that speed creates other elements, but it's not the skill that brings him and does things on the ice for him. It's his speed that does it. So we're starting to pick apart players back to like an original scout did, simply because of the fact that we've come to this point in the analytics discussion where we could start looking at single digit, or I keep saying single digit, but single metrics in order to determine the efficiency of a player.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, and like, sorry, Jesse, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Saw the mic come up. No,
you wanted to punch me. I saw
it. They're starting to get into like such specifics too. It's like we started vague, and now, like, I know Sport Logic does. I think they break the defensive zone down into like 9 parts, and you see a player's efficiencies in certain parts of the zone, but they're really vulnerable in others. And the one Della wrote about that sparked the conversation was how the Leafs, which Leafs change effectively. So Austin Matthews gets off the ice at really opportune times and really effectively. Bozak changes like a beer leaguer, and Kadri is actually kind of weak too. Yeah, which was surprising.
They get outscored and out possessioned after both of those guys get off the ice. But with Austin Matthews, it's the opposite. They score more, they shoot more, they outshoot and outpossess their opponents after Austin Matthews gets off the ice, which is interesting because he set all that up for them for the next line to jump on. So when we're looking at players in that light, when we're breaking them down to like really finite details, is it possible to break it down too much?
Oh, way too much.
Really? It is possible to overthink it.
Like you're looking at, I'll give you, Austin Matthews is a fantastic example. I probably could have written 3 pages for Austin Matthews alone. Just the little things that, and again, I'm going to make this my central point. It's not just skills, it's the integration of skills. You can't just be a good skater. You need to be a good skater that does something else to bring or enhance that skating, or the skating does something to enhance a less than elite skill, but you know what I mean? Tyler Bozak's a great example in terms of that too. It's not like he's really got a lot of elite skills, but he puts himself in a position where he could just use a shot. That's all he has to do. So he skates to a weak position, he gets the puck on his stick, it's off his stick, it's in the net. It's a very skilled player, but the feet and the hands don't connect very well. Individually, they're great. Together, they're not. So he has to figure out different ways to use an elite skill, which is his shot, when his skating is lackluster, His perception might be a little off at times, but he does what he has to do in order to exploit that one elite skill. Every NHLer has one elite skill. So it's a matter of identifying that and then seeing what can actually be accomplished with all the peripheral skills. So going back to Austin Matthews, I could easily write 3 pages worth of, oh my God, his skating induces this, and he doesn't need to be physical because he's got just enough space to be able to either use deception as a tactic, either with a stick or peripheral vision with a, just showing me that you're here, but then all of a sudden moving to another direction and you're attacking from a different angle. Like, there's lots of individual little things that a player can do, and we can overanalyze and kill it and break it down and break it down and break it down. To avoid doing that, you start putting together what you feel each player's individual elite skill is and all the stuff that makes that elite skill so effective in any type of game situation.
Yeah, Matthews is an exhausting player. Like, his attention to detail.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I could see how he'd be a nightmare for defenders, but not everyone can be Matthews. So in the example of a guy like Bozak, he does this well and he does this well. As a coach, you need to identify those skills. And if I'm not mistaken, that line, which is a little weak defensively, was given offensive zone starts for the most part. So, like, how big is coaching into it, you think?
Coaching is gigantic. And, I mean, we're going back to what we were talking about before. You're trying to find a player that fits into the mindset, the structure that the system the team is trying to play in. And that player has to be able to be fluid enough to stretch and kind of compress with the urgency and pace of the situation. So essentially Mike Babcock is saying, I need you guys to do this. I need you to play in this type of manner, and I need this structure. Sorry, I need this format. You're free to do whatever you want to do, but as long as we're still sticking to this format, because this is what's going to make us successful. So coaching has a distinct impact over what players do. And it's not just usage. We talk a lot about, he's on the ice with X. I get that players are complementary and all of that, but individual players make individual plays, and they incorporate their teams around them based on those individual plays, the thoughts that were popped into their head before they even made a move on the puck. So I find that a lot of situational issues are more, they weigh more on how a player does than who they play with and what lines coaches put together. That deployment of strategy and the system that they use and the structure that the coaches allow them to play in is more important than who their line mates actually are.
Wow. So, okay. So I guess we'll start with just getting into some specifics.
20
because
minutes
there's a few.
in. I guess we'll start with.
So, like, specifically, and it's good that we have that sort of background because it allows us to kind of jump into specific players and specific things. But, bringing up Mike Babcock, what's your assessment of him and how he used the various different tools that he was given last year?
Well, here's the thing. The Mike Babcock experiment was more impressive 2 years ago when they had no talent on the team than they did last year.
True, because they were one of the best 30th place teams ever, right?
You can say that.
And unluckiest,
From a statistical perspective, they
shouldn't have finished last.
They shouldn't have. There shouldn't have been that lack. Now, obviously, there were other little factors that probably contributed to that. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, what I felt was I saw the basic structure of how Babcock wanted this team to play. And then it was just a matter of plugging in more skilled players. If Babcock was asked last year, what made this team much better than, he always ended up going to the players. He always gave back to the players. It's injecting Matthews at first-line center. They never had a first-line center. They had to improvise. But the structure isn't very different. They still use the same type of support in the defensive, neutral, and offensive zone. They use a similar way to attack. They use a similar method of defending. And it's just a matter of having better, smarter, faster players at your disposal to be able to really capitalize on whatever the coaching is trying to do. And I mentioned support. Support is the biggest thing that I felt Babcock put into place, something that really wasn't around in Toronto. In Toronto, what we saw over the last, I would even go back, way back to the Pat Quinn days. We never saw a lot of support. We saw a lot of players that were able to do what they wanted to do offensively. Yeah, go create offense, but with very little mid-tier support. So it was either sink or swim. So you either had a great opportunity and then you had to hustle back, or the play broke down, and the natural flow of the game caused the play to come the other way. So what Babcock did was he said, guys, we're going to make sure that wherever we are on the ice, there is a support element. That support element has to be visible. And by visible, I mean within the structure of, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be in this exact spot. Rigidity is what I feel he took out of the Leafs regime and added a structure that players were able to play into and really using their own strengths.
So it's like giving them, instead of like holding them to one spot, it's like giving them a room to work with it.
You got it. It's easier to work in space than it is to work in a rigid north, south, east, west, or this is your zone. We talk a lot about zone, but there's a lot of area in a zone. And a player has to be free to be able to do whatever they want to do in that zone, as long as it matches whatever is happening in the other areas. Pace, urgency, and just to make sure that they understand where the puck is as well. That's a big issue.
So that's actually kind of a funny thing to hear, that what the Leafs had last year was support, because the big thing with them is, they can't play defense, they can't hold the lead. So is that something you saw improve as the season went on? Or
not really.
No?
I know that people saw that they probably did improve, but I don't think so. I don't think that they did anything dramatic to change the way that they approached holding on to a lead. I thought that they might have been a bit more diligent in terms of, the way that we describe defense in general, I think, is a little off. We describe defense as not allowing shots, not allowing goals. We still think of it in a bit of a primitive fashion. So when Babcock comes in and says, we're going to change the way the defense works or the way that we view something, the support element is more for getting the puck back and transitioning out, and not something that is there to try to hold the fort, make sure that we're not allowing big scoring chances or shots against or goals against and all of that. To me, support is a matter of there's a battle going on, or somebody is engaging another player when they don't have the puck, and there's somebody there to pick up the slack in case it's a foiled attempt or it works and now they need someone to get the puck to. That's the type of support that I feel that the Leafs lacked for the better part of a dozen years. And now it's in there. And that is a big thing that we saw with the Red Wings as well. So that support element, and I really, really stress that a lot, is the main contributor, I would think, to them being able to transition defensively back to offense and do those wicked things that they do in the offensive zone, like score goals.
Yeah.
They score a lot of goals.
They do score a lot of goals.
Scoring goals.
Yeah,
I love that.
So does that mean then, you say you didn't see them change much dramatically when it comes to the Leafs defense this year, and we got to talk about Morgan Rielly. I know you specifically mentioned that was a guy you wanted to touch on, but the defense as a whole going into this season, they can't go in here and defensively, I guess I include the forwards in that. They can't go in and blow leads like they did last year, right? They squeaked into the playoffs. If we're being honest, they squeaked in.
Yep.
And they're in a very, very tough conference, in a tough division. They can't afford those losses again this year. So what is it that they have to do, and do you think they'll be able to do it?
So that specific point was probably the biggest argument over the summer about getting a big-name defenseman to come in and shore up that defense and all of that. I really didn't think that they needed that. I think that they needed more, I'm going to use the word structure, but it's not really the right word, from the forward group to be able to help out that defensive group.
Discipline?
We'll call it discipline. It's probably a better word.
Okay.
Right? To be able to not just back check, but to provide supportive back check. And I keep going back to that word.
Not just be there, but be there effectively.
Where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, not work hard, work smart.
You got it.
Okay.
Right.
And it's interesting because we tend to look at players, and it kind of goes back to Bourne's comment about, we see a gif of a player back checking, we go, look, that guy's actually very good defensively. Who cares? It's one play. It's one play, one outcome. I mean, defense is not chasing someone back just because you have to. If you're chasing someone back, that means something broke down in the offensive zone and you're moving your butt back because you have to catch up to the play. That's not a defensive element. That's like, you're desperate at this point.
Right. Panic.
So you're looking at it from the perspective of trying to limit the amount of space the other team has available to make to make plays with the puck, be that up against the boards in small areas or across the entire ice. Make sure you have players in place that are in support. Forwards did an okay job of that last year. Part of that is just because they were really young. Part of that is because it takes a long time to be able to develop that mentality. You can get that from a Kadri and a JVR, and JVR is not a good example. He's terrible defensively, but you can get that from more veteran players because they understand a little bit more about integrating themselves into the system. How do you tell Austin Matthews not to fly? Buddy, don't fly. Just flap one wing and make sure that you're in. You know what I mean? You have to let these kids make mistakes, test those limits.
Nylander too.
That's a perfect example. What do you tell Nylander? Yeah, no, don't stop skating. Just make sure that you're here for support. No, that's not him.
You don't have Nylander for his back checking skills.
That's it.
You have him because he can snipe on you like easily.
He is the transition though. So if Babcock's probably putting something into play in his head, he's probably thinking, well, Nylander's probably the guy I want to get the puck to. So if it's on this side of the ice, I want to make sure I have X player here, Y play here. Be somewhere in this vicinity. Don't have to be rigid, but be somewhere in this vicinity. And you, knowing that I need you to get the puck up ice, you be my support. So these are the type of things I think Babcock is probably going over a ton of video over the course of last year and thinking, we don't really need a really big name defenseman. We need a better commitment on a team level to play better defensively, and we should be able to move forward better as a unit, not necessarily as just one individual getting better.
So what then does Ron Hainsey mean for this group?
To me, that's just a veteran, someone to maybe calm things down when things aren't going right. He's been through that situation before. He's a veteran of this league, so he seamlessly goes into, I need you to do this. So Hainsey becomes a good, solid veteran and a good warrior, and he says, okay, I'm going to do this. I might take some players under my wing because I've seen stuff. I've seen stuff you've never seen. So I can explain that to you, but until we experience that together and I go, hey, dude, you see what happened? I told you. You know what I mean? And now this is what's going to happen. So there's a good veteran element to that. It doesn't really show up in the score sheet or anything dramatic, but that's what you want from a veteran, slower. I mean, the pace of today's NHL is much, much quicker, you know? So what I would personally expect out of Hainsey, just be average. Be accountable. Don't make any big mistakes. Let the others that are going to be running with this team in the future do the things that they have to do and just be average.
There you go.
Wow. One of the guys that you mentioned, both Steve and I, in our pre-interview was Morgan Rielly. And there was some definite question marks about him. And it started to pop up about midway through last season. Because Morgan Rielly has for a long time been the Leafs' kind of key guy. And Jake Gardner last year...
Which is crazy, because he's drafted in 2012. I think he just turned 23.
Yeah, it's insane. And Jake Gardner sort of seemed to, at least in the analytics community, surpass him as the number one defenseman on this team. Fair or unfair? Morgan Rielly definitely got more defensive zone starts, was definitely called on to do different things, never got any power play time. Those sorts of things we started to kind of see, so that's why the dip in point production. What do you see from a guy like him? And you say we're mischaracterizing him.
Yeah, I kind of... Well, I don't think it's more of a mischaracter. I really have to explain myself here first.
You got time. It's a podcast.
So... Before I get into Rielly, we need to understand what is meant by defense. Defense is not a system that is pushing shots to the outside. If a system ends with a shot on goal, it's a failed system. If a play is designed not to do that and a shot on goal, to me, that's a fail. So it's less about avoiding shots or keeping them to a certain area. That's kind of one of the peripherals of what you're trying to do. A basic defensive system is engaging the puck carrier when you don't have the puck, really supporting that engagement with numbers, getting the puck back, and transitioning out. That's what a defensive system should do. Players that play well defensively have to fit one of those three elements. They're either the engage, they're either the support, or they're the transition. Jake Gardner is a terrible engage. I think we've seen enough of Jake Gardiner to know.
Like,
So give us an
he's
example.
passive when the other team has the puck. I would agree.
So
with
he
that.
wouldn't attack. So if
I said that more as a statement than a question.
if I'm barreling down the wing with the puck, Jake Gardiner is not the guy that you want engaging me.
Correct.
What do you want
Because
Jake Gardiner doing?
I want Jake Gardiner being the guy that plays the support element. So we go back to when he was here with Phaneuf. And Phaneuf was the guy that was getting barreled down on. Phaneuf was that first engage. He engaged physically. He did something to obstruct the puck carrier in some way
a hand and a stick.
that the support element could make sure the puck then gets away from them. And then Jake Gardiner is that guy that transitions out.
Okay.
So that's just one example. But to me, that engage, the support, and the transition are three distinct phases of the defensive system, and not every player can play every single way. Going back to Morgan Rielly. Morgan Rielly coming up through junior, the biggest thing about Rielly was the way that this guy could just move with the puck.
Flies.
Like, we talk about being a good skater and all of that, but you have to be able to, if the puck is 3 feet away from you, you have to have the dexterity to be able to handle it, to move and maneuver around players. And it wasn't like the junior teams that he were on. They weren't very good. Up front, there was very little scoring. He had to do everything. He got the puck and just, without question, barreled up ice and tried to do whatever they had to do. Now you get to Toronto. And in Toronto, you have more support up front. You have better scorers up front. You have players that you can get the puck to. He doesn't need to do these one-man Lone Ranger rushes.
Bobby Orrs.
Yeah.
And I find that for the majority of the time, Rielly's individual rushes weren't very good. Like, they would end up as a broken play somewhere in the offensive zone. So I felt that there was better ways that he can maximize what he's doing on the ice. So from a defensive perspective, and especially the way that Rielly's been characterized, what got him to the NHL was the ability to rush the puck, was the ability to really skate it out and provide some kind of danger in the offensive zone. That isn't exactly what was happening here in Toronto. He could still rush it up. He's a fantastic enough skater to be able to do so. But the success of integrating everybody else wasn't there. So what did the Leafs do? They started to pull back the reins here. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that to be successful. You could do other little things. They put him together on a line on a partnership with Zaitsev, who's a better engaged than he might be. Both together aren't very good engaged elements.
No.
They're not very good support elements either, because they just didn't seem to read off each other very well. But they're both fantastic in terms of transition. So what you get out of Rielly is a bit of a wasted skill set, because he can't really use what got him to the NHL to its fullest potential, but at the same time hasn't learned defense in the way that I just described defense to an efficient degree of yet. So what I would say for Rielly at this point is he's going to have to adapt to bring in a better overall element of engage, support, or transition than being better defensively in terms of blocking shots or keeping players to the outside or doing all the things that we tend to figure being defensively. At the same time, and this is why I really wanted to hit Rielly, the puck rusher versus a puck mover in today's NHL is what I feel a dying breed, because you don't need to have a defenseman rushing the puck up ice anymore. The reason why that used to happen is because you had a guy behind the net and they would skate it to the red line, dump it in, and then you had forwards that would flood and get the puck back. Good defensemen, I like Thomas Caberlet as an example because he was just fantastic at it. He can go both ways. He can go all the way up the ice, do whatever he had to do, and then get back. He didn't have to create scoring chances. He just needed to get that puck up. You don't need to do that in the NHL anymore. So what I feel is if you can get a decent enough player that can do one of those three things in the defensive strategy, engage, transition, engage, support, transition.
Yep.
You don't necessarily need to have the skill set like Rielly did as a junior to get him to the NHL. You don't need to rush anymore. You need to be able to move the puck at a quicker pace and more efficiently up the ice instead of skating it out. Pittsburgh is a distinct example of this. So, and the icing in particular. Before, we used to see icing as a strategy of just eliminating, get it out, get it down the ice, we'll deal with the face-off at some point. Then they introduced the no-touch and,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? and that's all fine and good. Prior to that, though, they started saying, well, okay, hold on. If you ice the puck, you have to take the same face-off. And so they're trying to eliminate that. So teams got smart. They started, instead of dumping it all the way out, they dump it to just before it hits the goal line.
Yeah.
The evolution of the game, though, and coming specifically from Pittsburgh, just because it seems to be the first place I saw it, was now you're taking this detrimental element of getting the puck out to cause an icing, to just getting out to ease the pressure, to now dumping the puck to the neutral zone in order to get your rushing forwards and get that puck and chase that puck and get the battle out of your defensive zone into the neutral zone, causing a turnover. It's now an icing play, or a dump out of the zone has now become more of an offensive strategy than a pressure relieving device. Defensemen don't need to skate it out anymore as much as they did back in the day. If they can, and very few can really do it as well as the Erik Karlssons, the Drew Doughties. Brent Burns is a terrible defenseman. He's a fantastic shot. And fantastic patrol of that top of the zone.
He's a great video game defenseman. I call it.
But he doesn't do very much in terms of those other three elements. You know, he's a decent engage. He's a decent support. It's not a very good transition, but he can at least pass the puck out. I would rather have someone that can pass that puck, get it out to the forwards, stretch everybody else out, limit the risk of having somebody out of play and causing holes in the back end just for, you know what I mean? That's what we talk about when we see players making mistakes and why coaches bench players. You should have been here. You were doing this, and that's all fine and good, but look at what you caused by doing this. Freestyling out of your system and freestyling out of your structure has detrimental effects, and players need to know about that.
So do you think a guy, like, they talk about defensemen not being really in their prime until they're 24, 25 years old, and Morgan Rielly's already played 300-plus NHL games.
It's crazy.
So it might be a little bit tilted, but he still has the age on his side. Do you think he's a guy that's in transition in terms of adapting? Do you see positive things coming from him?
Absolutely. To the degree that we saw a little bit of that time taken away from the power play, he's adapted. He's still doing the rushing thing, and I think that they're starting to take that a little bit away from him. But he's at that age where he still has enough to be able to accept the responsibility that comes with being, let's say, smarter defensively, not necessarily work harder, but being smarter defensively and being able to use some of the things that did make him successful going as a junior, as a prospect, into the NHL. Skating will always be a thing, but to me, I feel that if a player has got enough, or at least a good enough, first 2-3 step acceleration, they can catch someone. The art of hockey is about creating space or closing down space. That's what Morgan Rielly has to do. He's got the wheels to be able to do that separation. Closing down space is the challenge. And if he does end up getting and doing and adding more to his own skill set, he becomes a better engage. So now all of a sudden we're seeing this mindset from Babcock saying, we wanted Rielly to be more defensive, or we wanted Rielly to be more responsible. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about being responsible in the type of situation on the ice, wherever you are, and understanding and being able to reflexively react rather than thinking and outthinking and getting out hustled and being out of position enough for the opposition to allow him to attack his feet and make him pivot. And I can go on forever, but I'm just going to stop.
No, it's good to know. That's interesting.
So if you're Babcock then, based on skill set, I think what I'm hearing here, like who do you think Ron Hainsey should be playing with?
Rielly.
You think he should be playing with Rielly?
Yeah.
You think that's what they'll do?
I think so.
Because based on what you described, I think he'd be a decent fit with Rielly. I was going to suggest that. But then I was thinking of Gardner. I think he might be a good fit there too.
That would absolutely be just fine. Either of those players. If it's Rielly, it's less of a, I would call him less of a transitionary player.
Yeah.
If it's Gardner, he's all about the transition. It's about getting that puck up and out, right? Gardner, I would give a little bit more leeway to rush, but even then, you have to pick and choose your spots because you just don't have the space in today's NHL and systems. We go back to how coaches influence things. You make a mistake at the red line, at center ice, and you're screwed coming back. And it's not like Gardner is smart. I shouldn't say smart enough, but he's not structurally smart enough defensively to be able to get pressure coming back the other way. Gardner's an easy player to play against, I think, in terms of when he doesn't have the puck. There's other elements in regards to why I think that, but you can give him the leeway to be able to be like a rover more so than a defenseman. Rielly, I think, has the ability to become the main defenseman with a rover on his side. So those are the distinctions.
So they
between
are,
those two.
I mean, both of them are elite players. They're both, well, maybe not elite, but they're both very good.
Yeah. Elite is a word thrown around way too much, and there's very few elite players in the NHL.
It should be reserved for the elite.
Yes. Yeah.
You
the
got
very
it.
best.
Like less than a handful of NHLers should be called elite. Everybody has an elite skill or multiples of those skills. But yeah. So when it comes to, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say who's elite, but it might be an obvious question.
Like a defenseman.
A defenseman, probably Carlson would be the only one that I would say is an elite
Really?
defenseman.
Not
So
Doughty, not Keith, not...
Well, I mean, they have great skills, but are they really elite defensemen? Are they? Doughty, I guess you can kind of lean towards that, but I would not think of a lot of other defensemen that you would
Pietrangelo?
really... No, they're functional, they're capable, they're good players. And by not being elite, I'm not saying that they're not fantastic.
it means you hate them. It means you personally hate them and the
about
cities
time.
they play in and their entire fan base.
It's about time somebody mentioned that.
I know we're getting really specific Leafs here, and we'll branch out across the NHL
Whatever,
at
man.
some
We're
point.
from Toronto. I want to know about the Leafs.
I know. Well, so okay, I'm listening to all the things you're saying about defensemen, and you're making me think about them in a different way. So the wheels are turning in my little walnut here. How did the Leafs? It's insulting to use the word salvage, but how do the Leafs salvage a consistently effective defender out of Martin Marincin? Because based on what I saw, and this is from memory because I haven't watched a game in a very long time, I'm thinking he's a good engage. When he has the puck, he's shocking. But if he has the proper partner, I feel like that's actually a decent, cheap depth option. Is he not?
So I probably would agree to that.
Okay.
What I think makes Marincin effective, excellent size, reach, big wingspan,
It's like a condor.
big long stick, and the anticipation is essentially what his main skill is. He's able to anticipate what a player is going to do prior to him doing it. He's able to get that stick in and prevent zone entries. Marincin is known as the zone entry machine, right? Like
He's really good.
He's really good at it, right? You're only as good on zone entries as the support element that you have next to you. If there's nobody next to you, you're not making any type of an attempt to change a zone exit. You can't. You can't engage a 2-on-1 if you don't have support.
No.
It's just not worth it. So now at this point, Marincin just becomes a pylon. So what are you doing in order for him to maximize that? You have to get him back to the point where he's using that anticipation, long reach, et cetera, and not handling the puck very much. You got it, get it out.
So you don't see him being like a power play specialist anytime soon? Like a Thomas Vanek, maybe?
Man, Horacek is not in town anymore. Good. Oh my God.
Man.
Top pairing
Oh my
defender.
God.
Martin Marincin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those were the days. Memories.
No, keep going.
Sorry, let's say Marincin on the left, Carrick on the right. Would that make some sense? Because I figure Carrick would probably be the best guy
Probably
available because the other four would be up top.
Up higher, yep.
So
As a lower tiering, I like Carrick. I actually like Carrick quite a bit.
I love Connor Carrick.
Me too.
I think
We
that
discuss him every show.
I think he's awesome. I think he has the potential to be a pretty good 3-4 guy.
Yeah, he can play on that second pairing. Maybe not at this point, but there's something there that shows that he could probably end up playing there regularly. I just think that Marincin is more of a depth option. It doesn't really matter who his partner is. I just feel that the things that make him so, like, I guess, admirable or coveted are elements that you can get from other players, and they can probably do some other things too. So it's not like he's a bad player. He wouldn't be the guy that I would be inserting if I really needed some defensive help.
That's if someone gets hurt.
It would probably have to come down to that, yeah.
Okay.
And I would try to look at other options first before that. So,
Which I think is right where he is. Right?
Yep.
It's probably number 7.
So if it's up to you, and assuming that Travis Dermott makes a real good swipe at making the team. Like, I think he's got a chance. We're looking at and this is not necessarily pairings, but Rielly, Hainsey, Gardner, Zaitsev, Dermott, Carrick, and then Marincin.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then I don't know if I'm missing anyone.
Marchenko's gone. So.
Yeah. So
the potential of Liljegren, but I doubt it.
Right.
Yeah.
Who pairs with who?
I think you start off with Rielly and Zaitsev. Rielly and Hainsey. You probably go Zaitsev, Gardner, and then Connor Carrick with whoever on the other side, and start with that. See where it takes you. Play a few exhibition games, get a good feel of what's going on. For some reason, I have a feeling that it's eventually going to end up. It's probably going to start with Rielly and Hainsey, and it'll probably switch up to Gardner at some point. Gardner with Hainsey and Rielly back with Zaitsev. They weren't very good, but I mean, you can give them a second shot to try to redeem themselves. Go over video over the summer. You know what I mean? This is what you guys did well. Do this.
At some point, they had a bit of a mid-season skid, and Babcock, who barely changed his lines or pairings at all last year, finally switched up. He put Zaitsev with Gardner, and that seemed to turn things around a little bit.
Well, I mean, you're looking for a spark at some point, right? But at the same time, we're still not really figuring, is it really that pairing that did much better, or who were they playing up front? Was it that first line that was always then when they're on the ice? If I recall correctly, Jake Gardner spent the most time with the... Was it the most or was it the second most with the Matthews-Hyman pairing? So to me, that's a big
that could help
feature,
you out.
right?
Yeah.
If you're playing with those guys, then you don't need to worry too much about the defensive element. If you're playing with guys like Komarov and Matt Martin, and now you're more prone to be playing in a defensive situation. So results can be tricky depending on certain things. I love Jake Gardner, though. Like, I get that there was a lot of heat and all of that, and I get his defensive liabilities, and I really don't care about those. That's a coaching issue. Figure that out. You know what I mean? That's a Babcock problem. Same thing with Rielly's defense or whatever.
I mean, both of them have gotten better. I mean, there's no question that they are much better and much more reliable than they were.
I feel like we all love Jake Gardner the way you love a child. Just because I want to kill you doesn't mean I don't love you.
That is, I'm going to have to tell my wife that one. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's going to come up a lot.
Look, just because you drive me up a wall doesn't mean I don't love you. Okay, just because sometimes I think you're... Oh, sorry. Are we moving on?
Well, no. We can keep going. You can give more examples if you'd like.
No.
So then, okay, let's talk about that Matthews line, because a lot has been made, especially with the signing of Patrick Marleau. People really... we love Nylander and Matthews together.
I keep forgetting Marlowe's elite.
Yeah, Marleau's elite.
I keep forgetting.
And then you've got Zach Hyman. 8 goals, Zach Hyman. I think 8 goals, 20 points. And
I think he had 10.
Did he have 10 goals?
How dare you?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So he had 10 goals and missed at least 10 more. Because, bad luck sometimes, you misfire.
Should have had a hat trick when the Ducks were in town. I was there.
Absolutely.
He had 19 breakaways.
Had some shorthanded goals. Yeah. I think he broke the record.
4.
So, do you believe that Zach Hyman is the right guy to be on that line? And if so, why? This is it's a very high school question. Do you believe? If so, why? Or is Patrick Marleau going to be the guy that steps in and you move Zach Hyman down the lineup to where he might be of more use? Or how do you see this working out?
Well, I felt that Hyman was a bit of a waste with Matthews last year. I get what he brings. You get the energy. You get the fact that he's there and he does these little things like get into corners where Matthews doesn't have to. He absorbs some physical pressure where Matthews doesn't. I just don't find that the skill set to be able to produce offensively warrants the ability of doing these little things to get the puck to Matthews. If Matthews is going... And see, the good thing is Matthews is so much around the puck that it's pretty difficult not to get it to him if the play dissolves. So whether it's Marleau doing that, or whether it's Hyman doing that, or JVR, or Bozak, or whoever, as long as there's someone disrupting the play, Matthews is able to thrive. Man, there are times where I love seeing his hustle and the way that he's able to kind of maybe angle his way to get defenders to do things they don't want to do. But are you wasting that on 20 minutes a game just because of that little element? Like, I can't see that being anything other than Babcock saying, guys, for this season, you two are going to be together. You're going to be a placeholder. And Hyman, I felt, always was just a placeholder. Whoever was able to step in with a better skill set, then that player would essentially take over that role.
And up the left side, I mean, Patrick Marleau and JVR are your two main options.
Those are the guys.
So, it seems like Patrick Marleau's the guy to step in because Nylander Matthews together sure look pretty good.
We're only a few weeks away from finding out. It's weird. Logic says you're right. Logic says, of course, he was a placeholder. Marleau goes in there. Evidence suggests that's not the case because down with the Marlies, oh my God, I forgot his name. Sheldon Keefe stapled Hyman to Nylander. Stapled those two together. Gets up to the NHL, staples them together again. Austin Matthews, welcome to town, staples Hyman to him. And then he managed to staple both to him by the end of the season. So I have a hard time believing Babcock's not going to do it again.
Well,
I know he's got Marleau, but since when does Mike Babcock give a damn what Lou Lamoriello does? They're like, here, we got Frank Corrado because we think he'll be useful. And Babcock's like, that's nice.
Right, but Marleau's not going to sit on the bench, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit different than Frank Corrado.
I think in this particular case, I can't see how you put Marleau, because you got Bozak and JVR kind of, they're stuck together. They've been together forever. And then you've got Komarov and Kadri. Komarov's the left, right? Or is it Brown?
I think he's a lefty that plays on the right.
Right, so is it Brown on the left?
Brown was on the left.
Is that what they did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So where are you going to put Connor Brown? Are you going to put him on the fourth line?
No.
Connor
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just don't. I don't think so. And I don't see Marleau playing in a defensive role with Kadri and Komarov, which is that line, while Kadri did have 30 goals, is supposed to be a line that comes out there and is, I guess, a little bit, from what we were sold anyway, that's supposed to be a line that shuts people down a little bit more. At least Leo.
Here, let's try to figure it out this way. Can you convince me that it's worth it to have Matt Martin in the lineup? on this team. Great guy.
I wonder what's on Twitter.
What do you think, honestly?
He's not really a bad player. He's not really a proper NHLer or skilled or anything like that, but there has to be something that the coaching staff feels deserves a regular roster spot. As far as trying to convince you, dude, I might as well just talk to the wall because there's nothing that I can possibly say.
I'm open.
What can I possibly say other than, the coaching staff love him. The hope that you can have as a fan, if that was the case, was that they just limit his minutes. That's the only thing that I can see.
But I think they could have a decent fourth line.
Well, see, the thing though with Martin though is it's not like I don't mind physicality. Physicality is not about coming out and bashing, and physicality is about maneuvering enough to remove the puck from the player. Matt Martin does a decent enough job of that, just not effectively enough to play higher in the lineup. So perhaps what the element is, get more skilled players down there. Dominic Moore is a pretty decent example because he could take advantage. He's the support guy when Matt Martin is the engage. And you get another skilled player to complement those two. And you have something similar to what they were doing in on the island, where they had Cal Clutterbuck, Matt Martin, and the third guy escapes me. Cizikas, who had a great boot bruising, and they were good at doing what they were doing and providing pressure and a little bit of physicality. And Cizikas was the guy that was coming in, scoring goals, and got himself a damn good contract because of that.
Sure did.
So if you're adamant about having Martin in your lineup, then do something to have complementary players that can take advantage of whatever he does to bring in the lineup. If all he's doing is getting stuck in the neutral zone and getting stuck in the defensive zone, you got to rest him. You got to take him out of the lineup. But if he's doing something in the offensive zone, even if they're not scoring, but they're providing pressure, hitting, creating a turn, doing something positive, then I can understand exactly why coaching staff would want him in the lineup. So I might as well have just spoken to the wall. It's not like I can convince anybody that he deserves a spot, but the coaching staff and Lamoriello want him in there. So they have to figure out a method to take advantage of what he brings.
Now, is that the most effective use of the talent they have at their disposal?
I think when they end up picking up Matt Martin, it was under a different situation. They probably didn't have the expectations that they did and the results that they got last year. Mm-hmm. So had it been a year later, they probably would not have even bothered with Martin. But here we are.
Okay.
Here we are.
All right. Well, I look at a guy like, having the idea of having Connor Brown on the fourth. And not that the fourth line is what we grew up with it, right? And it's not the Fraser McLaren, Colton Orr fourth line that we are used to. It's much different now. The idea that Kasperi Kapanen still might not make this team because he does have the elite skating. The idea that Connor Brown's minutes would be limited potentially, or Zach Hyman, who played 20 minutes a game, would be. I could see him in that role. I could see him with Dominic Moore and Matt Martin. To me, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But that's the only thing that makes sense, and that might be what they're thinking. I don't see any other way that you're. And even at that point, you're still not. There's still no Kasperi Kapanen room.
Yeah, that becomes a logjam problem. That I think the Leafs might end up having that problem for a few years, which is a plus and a negative.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if that's how you're going to go, and this is the blueprint, and they play half a season and realize. Maybe they try to finally move him or do something else. I mean, we're at the point right now where you're right. There's definitely going to be a few players you're going, really? He doesn't make the team? He's not better than that guy? He can offer something more, could do something more. But until that player is no longer part of that active roster, those questions will continue to remain, right? And Kapanen is a pretty good example because I'm not as enthusiastic about his top line potential.
Mm-hmm. His ceiling.
I don't really think that he really has that first line scorer. I know that we saw him in some pretty big movement and pretty big moments, but I mean, there's a lot of times where I question exactly what Kapanen can possibly bring. But he could be a good average NHLer. And I mean, if you can put him on your fourth, move him up to the third, back and forth, hey man, you can't ask for anything more. You get guys like Hyman, Brown, and potentially a Kapanen, and that's a pretty decent lower scoring unit.
Fast, too.
Deal with that. Exactly. Now your fourth line, who you hope has enough speed to keep up with these guys, can keep up with these guys. So that's kind of the placeholder model and essentially what I would figure would happen. But, man, until they get Martin out of that lineup, there's not going to be that much space.
Okay.
So you could go and Tanya Harding him if that was the case.
No. Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm going to attack Matt Martin.
I think the reverse would happen.
We brought you in for hockey advice. Terrible life advice.
But I'm curious.
Terrible survival.
I am curious, though. Make sure you're getting video on that.
Oh, my God. Jesse, do you have any questions for the professor? Have you ever considered being a college professor?
Do you want me to film when you Tanya Harding?
Yeah, I mean... It'll be great, for evidence in court.
Yeah, how Steve Dangle missed a month of podcasts.
A month? That's it? How Steve Dangle missed the rest of his life.
Do you think it's possible for a guy like Matt Martin to still be the team dad and not play every day?
The team dad?
Yeah.
He could still, because he's already won the respect. We know that.
Yeah.
So the guys already love him. Is it still possible that he is the character guy that they love, but it's like, okay, sorry, man, we can't play every game because we have this many people and we're especially loaded on the wings, and he would understand that. And I think at $2.25 million, any of us would understand that. And he will play any role. So do you think then he still would have the clout to, especially with the younger guys, because it's clearly why they have him there, to bring those guys up mentally and keep them in good spirits if he's not playing every game?
I think as long as he was being treated fairly, and I mean, we really have to go off the ice here. I don't know what happens behind the scenes. None of us really do. But under the best assumptions and the most positive of assumptions, as long as the players feel that he's being treated fairly by management, regardless of the role that he's put in, and as long as he understands what management's expectations of him are, he could easily just be the daddy on the sideline and says, guy, you do this, you know what I mean? Or I'm here for you. Once there's a little bit of mistreatment, that's when I think it starts to fall apart. So if they wanted to pull him out of the lineup, give him a prominent role off the ice, and they stick to the plan, they're respectful about it. Matt Martin is also respectful about it too. He can't be sitting there going, guys, F this, F that, I don't want to do it. Like, that's not positive. As long as all those elements come into play, have a positive effect moving forward, I don't see why he shouldn't just be on the sidelines and giving somebody else the playing time for that.
And, by all accounts, like when you hear about the off-ice stuff with him,
he's great.
Supposedly it's, he's worth every penny. We've been hard on the Leafs, but I know you've written about, did you write about every team this summer?
Every team.
Every damn team. Even Vegas?
Even Vegas.
So, of all the player evals you did, what were some that stuck out in your mind?
Carolina.
Interesting. Yeah?
Oh, my God. You could just go to town on Carolina. Teuvo Teravainen is probably one of the breakouts that I really, really like this year. You're going to see a lot on Twitter about Jacob Slavin and all his offensive potential. I don't think that he's got a lot of offensive potential, but he's a fantastic hockey player.
Their core, their D core is
that defense is incredible. My goodness. Calgary's defense is probably the best in the NHL. I know that many people will say Nashville, but I beg to differ. I think that Calgary's is much better.
What makes you say that?
So I think that Nashville does well as a team. They do much better things to help prop up that defensive unit. Meanwhile, Calgary's defense is very fluid. They could bruise, they could skate, they could hit you with finesse, and they could really get ugly. So there's an element that can adapt to various situations that I don't think Nashville's can. And that's not to say that, a unit with Yossi and Ellis and Subban and Ekholm, but it starts to fade after that, right? Like Yannick Weber maybe is...
I'm trying to think of the other guys.
Yannick Weber.
Potato?
Potato's another one. So
Emelin. I forgot they got Emelin.
They got Emelin now.
Yeah, I forgot. But Calgary's solid all the way through. They could put a top pairing defenseman on 3 lines, on 3 distinct pairings. That's dangerous. So I like that blue line. I like Nashville's blue line. Carolina's blue line is fantastic too. Pesce and Slavin, and then you got Justin Falk, and it's just, it all works and it comes together very nicely. That forward group is incredible. Teravainen is that breakout. Sebastian Aho, we saw, if it wasn't for the fact that it was just such an incredible rookie year last year, Aho probably could have even won Calder.
Yeah.
So, there's a guy that kind of flew a little under the radar,
right?
And he's going to be full on out. Rejuvenated Jeff Skinner. Oh, my God. Carolina, for me, is the biggest one.
So do you think this is their year to rise?
I think that they can make the playoffs. I don't know how deep they can go into the playoffs.
As it's, first-year team to make the playoffs.
They had, was it league worst goaltending?
And they addressed that in bringing in Scott Darling.
And he doesn't even need to be fantastic. He just needs to be roughly league average, right?
Guys, my goaltending analysis is terrible.
You said this since the moment I met
I've
you.
never
Every time I ask you about a goal, you're like,
forget it. To me, a goaltender just needs to be average. If he has to make those crazy exceptional saves, there's something going wrong with your defenseman to put him in that position.
So is Carey Price good?
Oh, damn. Okay, you give the elite to the elite, but how many players are there like Carey Price?
There's one Carey Price.
There's a reason why there's only one, because it's a difficult thing, right? All the rest just need to be average. I don't need you to have a 1.1 goals against average. I need you to make that next save. That next save is dependent on the moment that leads up to that save. Your statistics at this point, while they provide some background to me, mean nothing to me if you're letting in that 4th goal to tie the game and then I got to go and score another one. That was the biggest problem I felt with Raycroft. You're winning 4-3. All of a sudden, he lets in that 4th goal, and you're like, "Oh, come on!"
Yeah.
And now I got to do that.
You go back and look at some of the analytics. Although it was the primitive, early versions of it, the analytics of the Paul Maurice Leafs. If they had just got freaking league average goaltending, they were terrible.
Average.
Yeah.
They were. What was it?
And
The Raycroft Toskala year.
He has the wins record.
Yeah.
Raycroft has the Leafs wins record in a season.
Tied
it.
The wins record.
Which means he partially has.
He tied it.
37 wins.
Yeah, and he played 72 games.
Wow. That's a lot of games, man.
Because Paul Maurice, I don't know, JSO Ban, spat on his windshield or something. I have no idea. I have no idea why I hated him so much. And I brought it back to the Leafs.
Yeah.
So Carolina is your breakout team, eh?
I love Carolina for what they're able to bring out. I think we're going to see.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I think Chicago doesn't make the playoffs.
Wow!
I don't think San Jose makes the playoffs.
Okay.
That's also surprising.
I don't think LA makes the playoffs.
And that's
Not as
surprising.
Oh, really?
Not a surprise. Well, but to
Well,
me,
they just missed them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it'd be 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. I
Sorry,
think
I didn't know what you said. All
they're
I
in a
was saying
retool
is-
stage, right? Like they can come back.
Retool.
Yeah. Do you think they need to fully I mean, they got some bad contracts on that team.
The problem with LA is they can't score. And until they inject some scoring help up front, or hopefully this new coaching, this crew is able to inject a method to score on a more consistent basis, they're screwed.
Have they tried the throw Dustin Brown and LTIR method?
That would probably be a good start, but you know the funny
You
thing
might need to do
is,
that with Marion Gabrick, too.
well, he's at the point right now where, you know, if he wasn't, it was health. It's a matter of health. He's a very good player.
Sure,
still.
of course.
His wheels aren't where they were, but he's got the hands and the sensibility. But that body just doesn't.
Doesn't function the same way anymore.
And the other thing too is, I know that we all like to pick on Dustin Brown and all of that, but like in a lower roster, apart from that dumb contract, he's okay where they have him situated down and as a depth player. They can't be playing him with Kopitar, and you can't be dragging that
That's
around
the problem,
all the
man.
time.
Like a lot of guys, like they have their career ruined by their own success. Kind of, you know, they're $1 million, $2 million players making 5 or 6, and no one wants you anymore.
So now the coaching staff has that as their prime. That would be one of my biggest projects over the summer. What do we do with Dustin Brown? How do we get him to a different level than where he is now without interrupting the forwards up front and trying to essentially, you know, inject some more scoring into the forward group? Because that defense isn't going to score very much either. Although they're very mobile and they're very good in terms of support, but man, that forward group is just dreadful.
What about
so crazy how much a couple of years changes.
Oh, it's
things.
insane. And a couple bad deals. Like, I mean, Dean Lombardi deserves credit for those cups, but boy, he hung on to some of those players way too long.
2 cups, though.
2 cups? 2
Yeah,
cups.
we talked about it. It's like, okay, well, now you lay in your bed.
Yeah.
But you have 2-time Stanley Cup champion bed sheets.
Yeah. He's got his cup rings plug in both his ears.
Yeah. Leafs win next year, don't make the playoffs for the next 5.
They won.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won.
Montreal Canadiens.
Guess how long I'm going to flaunt that.
So when we were doing the McKean's rankings, I think that they had Montreal lower than Toronto at some point, and I thought, you know, man, the Leafs just squeaked into the playoffs. I know that we're all hyped and we want Toronto to do well, and I personally, on a personal level, do, and I, on a team and citywide level, we wanted to do too. But I'm skeptical to think that they would finish ahead of Montreal. Having said that, if Carey Price falters, they're screwed. That blue line, they got rid of all that mobility. How the hell are they going to score any goals? So what we're going to see, I feel, from Montreal is more of one of those tactics that we were talking about earlier. Dump the puck to center, push the defense or the defensive battles into center, hope for the breakdown, and score more off the rush.
Doesn't that sound like the kind of style that Michel Therrien probably would have loved?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Well, and so you've got Drouin is a question mark at center. Is it Plekanec?
Plekanec, Philip Deneau, and then it's pretty
like
thin after
You could
that.
put Gauch as... I mean, if they were willing to put Drouin as their first center and Gauch as their second.
It's not bad.
I can't see how Galchenyuk isn't their number 1 center, though. Like, how can he not be?
And you put him with
doesn't sound like
Drouin.
he'll be a center at all.
Drouin, I don't think, is a good center either. The other thing, too, about Montreal is I think that many people are expecting Drouin to come in and be Radulov's replacement. He is not. He is not, and he won't be. And it's going to be a dramatic change up front for Montreal. When I say they can't score, they can't score.
Really?
Watch him just like the Leafs.
Yeah. Well, hey, there's the
Go
Leafs
ahead.
defense and there's everybody else's, but so that's where my question marks with Montreal comes, is that it seems like it's an incomplete lineup.
Yeah.
Like they had other plans and were unable to, like, you know, Andrei Markov leaving, which really hurt them.
Well, they got like $8 million in cap space. Like, if they wanted, they could go out there and
They
add
should
to their
have just
team,
signed
but, like,
Andrei Markov. Just sign him.
to too much money. Like, but who cares?
He's Andrei freaking Markov. He's
Yeah.
still playing.
You have the space.
Well, they filled that role now with Mark Streit, right? So that's not
And
gonna...
Carl Olsner, let us not forget.
Well, yeah, Carlos. So, but that kind of goes back to our thing, though, right? Like, I mean, Olsner is he's an okay defenseman, but he's not a puck mover. He's not going to be the guy that gets you the puck up ice. I mean, who's going to get the puck to the forwards? And who's going to skate with the forwards? I mean, Markov was the one that was, and mind you, an aging Markov is better than the non-mobility that they have on the line right now. Shea Weber may be a good guy at the point, and that's another element about defensemen. If you really want to start analyzing how good defensemen are, watch them within the 3 or 4 feet in the offensive blue line. That is going to be more important than being able to rush the puck up ice. So, but anyway, I divest.
Who are the best players that do that?
Shea Weber, Alex Pietrangelo, Drew Doughty is incredible. Brent Burns is incredible. Jake Gardiner is fantastic at doing it. I could give you a laundry list of players that are really good in that top.
Because that is a tricky spot.
Oh, you have to be able to keep pucks in composed fashion, on your feet if possible. Like it's a tricky skill set, and players that can do that are going to be so much more valuable as defensemen than puck rushers at this point.
Well, and if a player breezes by you and you're flat-footed, like forget it, that's a breakaway.
You're screwed. Yeah. So you need to be smarter about how you play that in order to not create the situations where you got to boot it to the back, right? Or you got enough support that somebody's already there and you can kind of maneuver, right? But that's a team concept.
Right.
So you got Shea Weber in Montreal, who's fantastic there, but what else does he really do? I mean, I get that he's a presence in the defensive zone, but man, defense is such a team-oriented concept that one guy is not going to intimidate. If you're so scared of Shea Weber, keep the puck on the other side of the ice. Have him come and check you.
Which I think by the numbers they did. Or no, they went after Mark. I'm trying to remember what I saw. Never mind.
Even in terms of play selection, make sure that Weber is covering the weak side of the ice, or he's the support element, never the engage, and he can't really do the transition very well. The forwards are going to have to do that. So there's Montreal's game plan, and that's what I would target if I was an offensive coach. I would make sure never get the puck on Weber's side, or maybe I do want the puck on Weber's side. Hit him with numbers, take him out of the play, and now the rest of the team, you just pluck your little diamonds in your little space wherever you can get them, and you start firing shots on the best goalie in the world.
Is Claude Julien the coach that can successfully execute this? Have they given him enough tools?
I think that they've taken away a lot of the tools that would have made him successful, right? Julien had at the same time, though, when Boston picked up Caberlet for a playoff run, he had Caberlet skating from the back of the net to the red line and dumping the puck in. Was he really using his skill set to the best of his abilities?
I thought Caberlet was a garbage Bruin, but that might not have necessarily
that might not have been his fault.
Anyway.
And I feel he got a cup. He's got a cup.
Here's my garbage can.
Thanks
right
for
here.
coming. So for the most part, I'm a little skeptical that he's the one to be able to bring all of that out. However,
but he's French Canadian, so that matters.
There's the plus right there.
You can't discount how important that is. Do you live here?
Are you from here? Then you
just trying to go through the Rolodex of.
It's incredible though, but but the things that he did implement, like over the course of the final part of the year, like man,
they got hot and they won the damn division. That they were already winning, I should.
In spite of themselves, I would say. In spite of themselves, they won.
But they always win in spite of themselves. It's the craziest thing.
And
Carey Price, man.
And here's the thing: when we saw in the playoffs, how could they have gotten through that playoff round and score so little? And now you're going to get to the point where you're going to have even less mobility off the front. You're going to have a less talented up forward group, and you expect to score more goals. Montreal's going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
I wanted to ask you quickly, because you mentioned it, and I meant to ask you at the time. Sorry to rewind this, but you said Radulov, Drouin. A lot of people see Drouin as the Radulov replacement. Tell me why he's not.
He's not. Radulov provided a size, physical, and intimidating. It's not like we're talking about scared, but in terms of tactics, those 3 points are things that aren't in Jonathan Drouin's makeup. He's fantastic. He's more skilled with the puck. He's quicker. He's a lot faster. And by quicker, I mean like 2-3 step acceleration.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Agility.
Faster is overall speed.
North-south speed, you know what I mean? And fast players are okay, but how often are you going 100 miles an hour? And if you're capable of doing 100 miles an hour, you're probably scaling back to 80 just so you can maneuver with the puck. So Drouin's skill set is more exciting and electrifying. He'll probably bring out players or people out of their seats on a more consistent basis.
That's a highlight reel. He'll be popular, yeah.
But Radulov got a lot of results. He was the one that would go into that corner and muscle the guys off the puck and get the puck and get it to another teammate. He was the one that would take a beating in front of the net. He was the one that would get a lot of pressure coming to him and work through it to score goals. Drouin's not going to be that guy. So now we're all going to see, and this is going to be fantastic as I watch throughout the season, we're going to see one crazy skill play from Drouin, and everyone's going to fall in love with it. And then they're going to start saying, oh, you know, he's better than Radulov and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to be saying, it's one play. It's one electrifying play. How much success is going to come off of that one play? You have to be able to do more than what he brings. And I'm not really sure that he's a proper replacement for Radulov in that degree.
How does that argument do on Twitter?
Have you noticed I haven't put it there? I've actually said that I don't think that Drouin is the proper replacement for Radulov. I just haven't.
And they probably didn't bring him in as a replacement.
No.
He was supposed to be a piece to augment him.
He was supposed to be, exactly. They were trying to re-sign him. It's not like he was supposed to be a replacement.
And Markov. Well,
Markov.
There were talks.
Well, had they not signed Alzner, they'd have been able to get Markov at what he wanted, Radulov at what he wanted, and Drouin.
They can still afford. They still, with their cap room, could have afforded one of them. They just lost. I don't get it.
And the other thing too, though, is we don't know what exactly is happening, right? Montreal could be in talks right now to start bringing in some more scoring power.
Big trade.
You never know.
Jagr's
if they have that
there.
kind of
Cody Franzen's out there. Thomas Vanek just got.
Okay, tell me about Jagr, because he's still a free agent.
He's going to get signed by the end of the show.
Yeah, watch.
Always happens.
Always yep.
Happens.
Other than for the marketing and for the goodwill and for the veteran leadership, I just don't see why you can't bring another player into your lineup that Jagr would replace. Like, I get it. He scores 40 points or whatever the case is, but, man, you have to take a player out in order to give him the ice time to be able to get that point. Last year in Florida, they were just so devastated, and he was one of the main guys. He produced because he was one of the main guys. If he was to bring him into Montreal, he would become a secondary figure. It wouldn't be a bad, like, don't get me wrong. I don't mind if Jagr gets signed somewhere, but I feel that it's more of a marketing and leadership element than it is on-ice performance.
Golden Knights. That's what I would do.
Why not? Even if we talk him down to there, there's still, I would say, a half dozen teams around the league who could use him. The Devils don't have anyone up front. They don't have a team yet.
He's already been there.
The Panthers are short-staffed. His former team. Vegas, I don't know. They'll probably go young, right?
I would figure all the teams that you just described would probably
will go young. Maybe that's why all the bad teams are young.
Montreal, man. It seems to make sense in Montreal a little bit.
Only because they have a lot of the cap space available for that too. And again, it's a goodwill marketing element, you know.
Softens the fact that they lost Markov and Radulov.
They're going to have to give him cash because he doesn't want to pay that Quebec tax.
Oh, right.
You have to give him cash. But they got cash. They got it. They have enough to go out and sign a big free agent and make an enormous trade deadline acquisition if they wanted to.
And if they bank some of that cap space, it could be very, very lucrative for them too. So maybe that's part of the strategy that Bergevin's walking into Montreal with, right?
Imagine, you're a team, you're doing pretty good heading into the trade deadline. You got a bunch of cap space, and the Islanders have a terrible year, and discussions fall apart with John Tavares. Can you imagine trade deadline acquisition John Tavares?
Then they're a Stanley Cup contender right there.
No matter what team we're talking about.
You're
a potential Stanley Cup contender. We're talking about Montreal's problem at center. No more problem at center. It's like the Leafs. What happened? Like they had such a problem at center. Kadri, Bozak, those guys have been there the whole time. Oh, Matthews. One guy.
It's very hard to find that one center, man. That one C is just such a difficult acquisition.
That's why I can't see the Islanders letting Tavares go.
Oh, it'd be so devastating on their end.
Like, did there just be like
Takes two to tango, though. Maybe he's done.
Maybe he is done. But man, I just, if you're the Islanders, that's got to be the only thing that you care about this year is getting that guy re-signed because you can't replace him.
Screw playoffs, screw contending, screw everything.
Yep,
Get
get him under contract. That's all that matters.
It's going to be tough on them, too. I don't have them as a playoff team at the moment. I know that they came on late and everything, and Doug Wade did a decent enough job afterwards, but my God, that team was a train wreck. So
for as good as they were for stretches, they were equally
horrible.
as bad for other stretches. Yeah,
Buffalo.
I think that if with a healthy Eichel, they could probably make enough noise to make the playoffs.
Eichel is far more special than he's given credit for.
Oh, the way that he's treated is incredible. He's a decent enough player to be saying, he's one of the young masters of this game at this point.
Right.
And I'm kind of hoping that that's what we see this year from Michael because, you just see him in his individual element and you're like, wow, like why doesn't he get more respect than what?
Because he's not Connor McDavid.
Or Austin Matthews.
Or Austin Matthews, yeah. Now, if Jack Eichel were a Leaf, Jack Eichel would be in what Austin Matthews territory, right? Like it's because it's a bigger city, bigger hockey market, and with no offense to Buffalo, it's just more people.
Yeah. You got it.
And also, I mean, I think the fact that he came in under Connor McDavid and that Tim Murray was visibly disappointed to get him, which is ridiculous.
That's terrible.
I mean, and you could see why Tim's gone. I wanted to ask you about
can you?
Yeah.
Sorry, that'd be the sarcastic response he would say.
I don't think anybody in Buffalo is arguing that, though. Tell me about the Edmonton Oilers. They're a big mystery to me. Yeah. Are they actually good, or are they just Connor McDavid?
They are...
It's copyright infringement.
Oh, right. Sorry, Jeff.
They are... they're a decent team that gets pushed way over the edge because of Connor McDavid. So, having said that, Draisaitl and McDavid played a lot last year together. If they can separate those two and get two heavy-duty scoring units, you take a little bit of the pressure off McDavid. The thing, though, is I think McDavid likes playing under that pressure. Like, I mean, he's always been. That's part of his makeup. It has to be.
Triple teamed in the OHL.
Yeah.
Still put up 100 and whatever points.
And he comes to the NHL as a young kid, and he just dominates like right off the bat. And so my concern with the Oilers is that blue line is still pretty terrible. Larson, I know we got Taylor Hall and all that, but for the player that he is, he did a decent enough job, but the rest of that is not very good. Oscar Klefbom is probably a name we're going to see a lot more. He's a fantastic player. Loves spraying the puck to the net, can skate, does a decent enough job defensively that he gets those top-line minutes. Oscar Klefbom becomes a better player this year than he was last year. But is that really enough? I'm not really sure it is enough. So if they get average goaltending, they get decent enough play from their blue line, and they can get average output out of their forward group minus Connor McDavid, they could be contending for the top of their division. Calgary too. I think those two teams are the ones that top.
Battle of Alberta this year is going to be fun.
It's funny. We threw out the word elite earlier, and it's just amazing what elite talent can do, because we were just like, Edmonton, whatever, decent, mediocre. Habs, I have no idea what they're doing. Yeah, they're pretty mediocre. You think they'll make the playoffs? I think they could win the division.
Yeah.
It's amazing what elite talent can do.
That's exactly what it is. Montreal can win the division just by Carey Price alone. But
if he has just a tingle in his hip.
You got it. Connor McDavid, if he gets hurt,
that Ducks team that made it to the final in 2003. What was that? It was Jaromir Jagr is what it was.
Yes. Yeah, he had a run.
He had one game away. One game away. That's all you need.
Yep.
A couple guys who can score. Hey, we got this grizzly old defenseman who can grow a beard and has a hard shot. And we have Carey Price. Throw in a bunch of who cares.
It's a bunch of stuff. It's the things I kept saying about Chicago last year, and I think that it still applies this year. Their core players, if their core players don't stand up, they're screwed, and we saw it in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, let's go more into that, because I think that was the biggest bomb that you said.
What did they score? 3 goals in 4 games?
Something like that.
Yep.
Against Nashville.
And 3 of them were in the last 2 games too, so it's not pretty.
So Chicago essentially tried to rebuild Chicago that won a few years ago, except a couple years older. What all of a sudden makes them not a playoff team?
Well, for one, I think that they had fantastic goaltending last year. And when they were solid enough in net, that their defense was a little more pliable in terms of what they were able to do.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know who their backup is.
At this point, I'm not really sure. After Scott Darling left.
Good question.
I'm not even sure.
So
Corey Crawford's a starter. That's what's important.
So if Corey Crawford falters or just gets more average, then I think that takes away from Chicago. I think that their core players, the Jonathan Taves, now it's going to be Brandon Saad, Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, and Brent Seabrook, even though Seabrook really shouldn't be, but part of that core group. If those players falter, they can't produce in the same passion, or they get hurt, there's not enough peripheral talent in Chicago to be able to step in and replicate Kane's production or what he means to the Blackhawks.
Anton Forsberg or Jean-Francois Berube? Forsberg, I think, came over in the Panarin deal.
Correct.
So
like their backup is a backup. You just need average goaltending. Right. But if Crawford doesn't step up, they're screwed. If any of those core guys don't perform above their expectations, they're screwed. So you can get away with an 82-game schedule and be kind of coast through, and then you might even win your division. Who knows what happens along the way? Tampa Bay missed the playoffs, but look at the injury and what they did just to make. You know what I mean? There's other things that happen along the way that allow teams like the Leafs to make the playoffs.
Those freaking guys, man.
So
that freaking team. It sucks so bad for the Leafs because you looked at, like, I think Tampa had like 5 games left, and you're like, well, the Leafs need to win at least this many because Tampa's going to win out. We know they are. And then they did!
And they sold at the deadline. And still almost.
To the Leafs!
Yeah, Tampa is going to be very good this year.
So you had Tampa, Boston, and Florida kind of faltering a little bit last year, and it allowed the Leafs to...
Which falter was for real and which one is...
Boston was for real.
Boston's for real.
Really?
Yeah, Boston's for real. That blue line stinks too, so it's going to be challenging. And they don't have a lot of scoring up front either. I mean, after Boston's Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak, it gets really thin.
Well, that's if Pasternak resigns.
I'm going to go under the assumption that he does. Because how can you not? How are they going to... If they can't move him, they just can't.
No,
you can't continue that same pattern.
What is it? Kessel and Sagan?
Jeremy Jacobs would like a word.
Dougie
Hello,
Hamilton.
old rich white man. Are you going to be
this
not
young kid
predictable?
is too much guff. He's giving us too much guff.
Nah, I'll just do you like the others.
Trading to Vegas.
Trivia question for the two of you. How many defensemen do the Chicago Blackhawks currently have under contract?
Ooh.
My favorite is Colorado, who has 3.
So they've got 3. Okay. I'll say this: Chicago has at least that. So name them.
Okay, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Buddy from Arizona, Murphy.
Connor Murphy.
Connor Murphy. They don't have Halmerson anymore. They don't have Oduya anymore.
Don't have Teuvo Teravainen anymore.
No. Well, he's in
Forsling, I think, was one.
I think
Or is he signed?
No, Forsling is not signed.
No.
He's not even an RFA. He's gone.
No Trevor Van Riemsdyk. Who the hell do they have?
The last 2, the first 3 you got right, Kempney and Roosevelt.
Right.
Michael Roosevelt.
39-year-old Michael Roosevelt.
So there we go with the core players being able to do something, right?
Duncan Keith's going to have to play every minute.
Being a Leafs fan, you can't really judge for signing an aging defenseman.
No, I know. I'm just saying. No, Roosevelt, they signed him.
What are they thinking? Yeah, you're right.
They had to sign him. Like they have to dress a person. They have to put some pants and a jersey on a guy, right? So it's going to be Chicago. You're right. I didn't even think about it. It's going to be a really interesting year to see what they do. And Patrick Sharp is back. He signed for $800,000.
Yes.
There's another old guy, but on a wicked deal though.
35 on an $800,000 deal for 1 year.
What a strange deal.
Yeah.
He's not the player that we thought that he was. He's not Patrick Sharp anymore. He's a little bit of a broken commodity, I feel.
It's funny. I think Greg Wyshynski said it, like 4 great games from Pecorine made oh my God, what's the jam in Chicago? I'm completely blanking.
Stan Bowman?
Yes, thank you. Stan Bowman. Made Stan Bowman completely lose his mind. 4 games, that's all it was.
Right. Yeah.
Just how 12 minutes made the Leafs completely lose their mind in 2013.
Yeah. And thank goodness
4
they
games.
did lose their mind.
Thank goodness.
Because look at where we are now. Thankfully they made all those terrible choices back then, because look at all the great things that have happened because of it, right?
The playoffs, man. The playoffs.
Would Mike Babcock and Lou Lamoriello be general manager and coach? I don't think so.
Nope. I don't think so either. The circumstances kind of came up to that, right?
Hey, guys, listen. We know you're legends, but we want you to sign with this terrible team with a history of making terrible choices with young players, and we think you can turn that around. Who knew that was the strategy to get those guys, right?
Do you guys have any questions? Because I feel like I've been hogging this. I've been like, I feel like going, hockey dad. Listen, you're one of my hockey dads. You, James Reimer.
12 minutes.
Oh my God.
I have one question.
I'm pretty honored to say that. I'll be honest.
What do you think of era-adjusted numbers and swapping players in different years?
So, I guess from comparative purposes, I really don't know enough of the math to be able to say that they're accurate or they were. But
it's basically taking the average number of goals a team scores and allows. So we can say, like, now they allow and score fewer goals than they did about 10 years ago. And then in the 90s, it was, no one scored at all. But then in the 80s, everybody scored. So you basically take the math there and you go, for example, Gretzky's 92-goal season, era adjusted. I know it's insulting. I think it's 69 goals, which is still a nice number. But it's not 92.
So it's a tough argument to make, just because I think that first I would never compare players like that from modern day to the past. It's something very different. They were not the same players. Goalies were different. Styles were different.
Equipment was different.
Oh, imagine! Have you ever felt goalie pads from like the 70s and 80s?
Heavy.
I died just trying to bring, and these guys were playing, and then that was just dry. Imagine when they got wet. So it's worse and harder. It's so. While I get the mathematics to be able to do the type of comparison required, I don't know. I don't know if I find a lot of value in the comparison from today to the previous.
Yeah,
eras.
because that was going to be my follow-up question of comparing players when they say, "Oh, this guy looks like this guy from this era." It doesn't make sense anymore, right? Because it's not a similar game.
Yeah, there's too many things that happen today that didn't happen way back in the day. I mean, now you have players that are playing 12 months a year. They're either training or competing. They're doing something in order to be better than their current peers.
Yes. Sorry, when you said that, I was like, things that happened back then that don't happen today. 3-on-1 brawls with two-handed slashes to the head. It's training, yes.
Yeah. And everybody got like the Philadelphia flu because they didn't want to play against the Flyers, so I'm sure that some of that helped. Like, I mean, and you're playing against the Leafs in the 80s, and if you were around in the 80s, do you guys even remember the Harold Ballard years?
No.
Oh, my God.
We were like 2 or 3 when he died, so.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
My God. I remember I was working as a waiter when the Leafs picked up Doug Gilmour, and I dropped a stack of plates because it was something I thought, okay, Harold Ballard would never have allowed this kind of stuff to happen. And wow, just...
Game changer.
That was an incredible era. You can't describe the feeling unless you've actually gone through it. Just to think that, like,
oh my God,
you traded,
You got him.
you truly are a Greek Leafs fan.
I dropped the plate.
It's ingrained in the blood. Dude. It's in the blood. You never take the Greek out of it.
You've been blown away since birth, yeah.
Well, Gus, I gotta tell you, man, it was such a pleasure hanging out with you today, and it's so great to get an intricate feel of the game and where it's going, and just the X's and O's of it. Really.
Yeah, pleasure's always mine, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I will continue to hit you up for advice on DMs throughout the season, because sometimes I just don't understand things.
Whenever you want, I'm all here for you. I wanted to do it while you're on BT, just so I can say, "Hey, guys, live advice, live advice."
Hey, wipe your face. You got schmutz on it, please.
You need some sand for all that grease. Plug away, man. You wanted to. You got to.
Yeah, please plug.
Yeah, thanks. I've, like Adam was saying, I worked all summer on the McKean's yearbook. This is the 22nd year that it's been in existence. it was primarily a scouting report book, like fantasy-wise, but based on skill sets. We got away from that as we moved away from the print magazine, and it's now become more of a digital element. And we felt that we needed to incorporate a little bit more of the advanced statistics and things that have become more modern to hockey. I felt that we got away from that a little too much last few editions. So my job this year was to rewrite the scouting reports. I call them player profiles because scouting is a bit of a dirty word to me now. And I went over and I redid all the skills. We went through the 4 S's of scouting: speed, skills, smart, skating. We did a proper profile, a little bit of fantasy analysis for those that are still looking for fantasy angle. I went through tons of video, tons of updates to players that I can't believe that this still exists and this is not the player that he is. And at the same time, when these were originally written, they were written in an era that didn't take into consideration things like less fighting in the league, the analytics angles, and what they've brought to the type of analysis that we do. So I spent more time this year making sure that I got a lot of those little details right, and spent less time worried about integrating new metrics and trying to get WAR and GAR and all of those, which sound really cool, but it's difficult to put into a profile. In today's environment, analytics rules, charts, things that you can quantify, they rule. But there was a resource missing. There wasn't a good enough resource out there that had player descriptions. I wanted us to be the industry's best, so I tried my summer to do that, and we'll see what the readers have to say.
Now, is it digital only? Or
It'll be digital only with a subscription to McKeen's Hockey.
So you got to pay for it.
Correct.
Okay. You're all rah-rah, so excited to support the Athletic. I'm asking you to support something else as well.
Right.
Put your money where your mouth is. If you want some good information, buy this thing.
Right.
And when is it out?
So it came out yesterday. It's going to have 2 components. One is going to be the traditional McKeen's yearbook, but in a PDF. And all the things that are carried in it, on top of players that didn't make the yearbook, will all be available on the site. So if you're looking for a quick, dirty, hey, Adam, I need a thing on this player, there it is.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. We'll be buying. So thank you so much.
You can follow me at Cats Hockey.
I thought you were going to clap. I'm clapping on my own here. You said you were. You look like you were
Hockey.
clapping.
Yes, no, you're right. You're right. I was just doing the subtle golf clap.
I'm like, cool. Yeah, follow Matt on Twitter at Cats Hockey. If you've got questions, always reach out. And
face
of course,
planted
subscribe
at the
to
finish line.
What else would we do, man?
You're right.
That's the way we do
You're
it.
right. All right, and let us know how the Jagr signing goes.
Yeah.
Because we know that's happening too.
Hoppa.
Follow the guys on Twitter at Steve_Dangle, at Adam WYLDE, and at Jesse Blake.
The Steve Dangle Podcast. Brought to you by Panago Pizza. Order at panago.com and stuff your face with deliciousness.